So recently, JoshSonic on Twitter posted a three-part tweet, if you will, where he talked about the fact that even though he wasn't very fond or big of a fan of the, soft retcon and reboot of the Archie Sonic, post 252, if you will, that there was one exception. And that one exception to him, and I'm totally in agreement with this because it was one of the arcs I was looking forward to the most, and honestly, my hype for it, my look forward to-ness was paid off with a great story. But he said there was one exception, one story that was an exception, that he and I, and I'm sure others would agree, was the exception in a big, big way, and that was Spark of Life. Spark of Life was a 4-part Sonic Universe arc, which was basically talking about and telling us about the origins, the post-soft retcon, post-soft reboot origins of Nicole. That's right, Nicole got a 4-part story arc on, who she is, her origins, how she came to be, stuff like that. In the post-soft retcon reboot world, if you will. Soft reboot, that is. So, anyway, basically, Josh, and even myself, feel that this was one of the better stories that they had done. And why? Why did Josh feel this way? Why do I feel this way? And why do many others possibly feel this way? Well, it's real simple. You see, Spark of Life kind of had that old school pre-soft retcon, pre-soft reboot feel to it, as well as it also had a bit of a Sate-Am feel to it. Based on, how the story was written, what was at stake, the places, physically and digitally the characters, ventured into, things like that. Now, Spark of Life, in my opinion, would give us pretty much sort of a hint of what was to come in the next, several months, if you will. Well, I wouldn't say several months, but basically it gave us kind of a hint and an idea of what was to come later down the line. Because you see, after the whole Sonic Unleashed, Panic in the Sky, Brave New World arc wrapped up, one of the planned story arcs for Sonic Universe was to do a 4-part Freedom Fighters-centric story. Basically, where each of the Freedom Fighters would be given their own stories individually in this 4-part arc. The only catch is they would have to be paired with a Sonic playable game character. That's right. And the reason I bring this up is because Spark of Life, pretty much in my opinion, was one of the stories that kind of set the table for that. And why do I say it set the table? Because here, yes, the story was focused on Nicole. Yes, the story was focused on Sally. But you had 2 game characters alongside them. That was Tails and Big, 2 who are basically very established in the Sonic gameverse. So why were they there? Well, just like the potential, or what would have been the potential upcoming Sonic Universe arc that focused individually with each issue on the Freedom Fighters, the reason Tails and Big were there is the same reason Sonic would have been there in the first issue of the Freedom Fighter arc with Antoine. The same reason Blaze would have been teaming up with Bunny. The same reason Tails would have been with Sally. The same reason Knuckles or Silver or whoever they would have gotten would have teamed up with Rotor. And the reason being is because it was mandated. It's a mandate, if not an agreement, at that time, between the partnership of Sega and Archie, that yes, you're allowed to basically make these stories, but on the condition that you got to have a game character or so to go along for the ride. Because when it's all said and done, these comics were still based on the Sonic game franchise, and if you're going to have any character involved, you gotta have, or you're gonna have any non-game character, I should say, involved, then you also have to have a playable game character along for the ride as well. Now I do have to correct myself. I think it wasn't Sally and Tails that would have teamed up in the 3rd issue of the Freedom Fighter arc. I think it was going to be Sally and Amy. That's who it would have been. And I think Rotor and Tails would have been in their own arc. So got to correct myself on that. But still, that was basically the plan, you know, after everything was said and done. And like I said, Panic in the Sky, you know, not Panic in the Sky, but Spark of Life, if you will, set the table. It set the tone for that potentially happening. But to get back to Spark of Life, before I ramble on a little bit, and I am doing this outside while I wait for my bus to get back home, why is Spark of Life, to someone like Josh and myself and potentially many others, why is it considered the exception, you know, as being a great story, you know, amongst all of the post-soft retcon and reboot stories that we got, you know, mini arcs and stuff like that, self-contained? Why is it considered one of the best, if not the best? And again, like I said, it's because, in my opinion, it had that nostalgic feel of the pre-soft reboot, soft retcon stories. And also it had a bit of that SatAM feel to it. It felt like you were reading each issue an actual episode. I mean, if you really get down to it, if you take, you know, 2 issues each and merge them together for one episode, you essentially got a 2-part miniseries here that you could show on television. And that 2-part miniseries would have been Spark of Life Part 1, Spark of Life Part 2, there you go. But yeah, basically that's what it felt like. It had that old school feel to it. You know, had that old school pre-soft retcon, soft reboot feel to it that the comic was known for, but it also had a bit of a SatAM feel as well. You know, just by the way it felt episodic, the way it felt, you know, script-wise, story-wise, it had that old school, you know, SatAM and pre-soft retcon, soft reboot Archie Sonic feel to it. You know, that's what it did, and I think that's why it was very appealing. The other reason I think it became a big hit for a lot of people is, myself personally, it was something we were looking forward to. We knew the moment it was announced that Spark of Life was going to be Nicole's origin story, if you will, basically kind of tell us the story of how Nicole came to be, that, you know, it was going to be a hit. Because a lot of us, including myself, have been waiting for Nicole's origins in the post-soft retcon, in the post-soft reboot world of Archie Sonic to be told. I mean, we were all glad when Nicole, you know, got more character development in the comic, and essentially that led to her in the pre-soft retcon, soft reboot Archie Sonic world, to her getting her creating her own Lynx form. Everybody was happy for that moment when, you know, she first appeared in Stargazing, and then the more, you know, with that Lynx form, and then the more she started to appear outside of that story, you know, like with, you know, teaming up with Shadow and Sonic, you know, the whole, you know, 75 to 77 3-part story, or 175 to 177 3-part story, you know, stuff like that. You know, this was a moment, you know, we had been waiting for. We had been waiting for this. I mean, the fact that, you know, even, you know, pre-soft reboot, soft retcon, she was getting some focus, not just because of the Iron Dominion arc, not because of the fact that Naugus was trying to turn the populace against her, you know, and everything, and the fact that she was at the center of what happened to Sally that led us into the Mecha Sally arc, and that her story arc, her character arc of redeeming herself, coming out of her depression, you know, thanks to, of all characters, Mina Mongoose, who basically went to her and apologized for, you know, having the message that she was trying to get across be manipulated in a way it shouldn't have been. You know, we all wanted something more for this character. We wanted to see something more coming out for this character. And even though we went through this, you know, post-soft retcon, soft reboot situation because of legal issues behind the scenes, to actually finally get this kind of a story arc was worth it. And I think we all knew that the moment, like I said, it was announced that it was going to be a hit. And it was. It was a huge, huge hit. And a lot of people were gushing over it from top to bottom, from page to page. You know, and some people even say that the way her origins portrayed here is a little bit more better than it was originally, not just in the cartoon or in the pre-soft retcon, or the pre-soft retcon soft reboot version of the book, if you will, but overall, they felt like, hey, her story arc, has the potential to have more added to it. And Spark of Life gave us that opportunity. It gave us that opportunity to see the fact that it did have more, potential to it. And Spark of Life gave us that potential. They really did. I mean, the fact that they used Spark of Life to do the one thing that I honestly believe they were potentially testing out and see if they can get away with the other non-Sonic game playable characters, the Freedom Fighters, that is. The fact that they used Spark of Life to give Nicole a super form. Yeah, Nicole, a super form known as Overclocked Nicole. The fact that they gave her a super form, her, a non-playable Sonic character, a freedom fighter, a character that began as a portable AI in the cartoon and in the comic before developing into what she was pre-soft retcon, soft reboot, and more so in the post version, in the post era. The fact that they paid it all off with that, to me, is worth it. And again, I truly believe by them giving her her own, super form, that it was a test to see if Sega will allow them to do more with the characters, to allow them to do something similar with Sally, to allow them to do something similar with Bunny, potentially Antron, Rotor, you name it. I think this was a test. And you know what? Maybe it was also a test to see if potentially they could give Amy a super form, or maybe Cream a super form. I'm just saying. To me, this was a test. And even though we never got the clear-cut answer of whether or not that was going to happen with the other characters, which I believe would have happened if that 4-part Freedom Fighter arc would have occurred, after the, Panic in the Sky situation, even though we didn't get our answer, to me, to that question of if it would have happened to the other characters, to me, this was still worth the wait. This was still worth the payoff when it was all said and done. And the fact that they revisited this form in the finale, in the Panic in the Sky finale, is saying something. The fact that they were able to revisit it shows me and tells me that Sega was okay with it. Sega was like, fine, you could do this. But it's only got to be a one-time or two-time deal or whatever, or once-in-a-while deal. So the fact that they got away with this twice, again, tells me we would have probably seen it happen with the other characters. I really do. But overall, when I look at Spark of Life, I totally agree with someone like Josh. And I'm sure everybody else would agree with him too. That this is an arc that, even though some of us may be, back and forth and mixed about, the post-soft retcon, soft reboot situation and the stories involved, that if there was one positive to come out of this, one positive period that came out of this, it was Nicole's Spark of Life story arc and the payoff that we got with Overclocked Nicole when it was all said and done. Now, yes, did Spark of Life feel like it was also kind of telling us the love story of Sally and Nicole? Basically trying to semi-officially confirm that these two have a bit of a relationship that goes beyond friendship, that kind of ventures into the, bisexual, LGBTQ, territory. Did this story do that as well? Absolutely. Absolutely. But they didn't do it in a way that made it so obvious, so obvious to the point that they kissed each other or anything like that. But they did it to a point that made it semi-obvious and official in the eyes of some fans that yes, these two were more than friends, and that this story arc helped, can help basically sort of, strengthen that, assumption, that suspicion, if you will. So overall, when I look at Spark of Life, like I said, just like Josh, I totally agree with him. I totally agree with him on the entire situation. I totally agree with him on the fact that it's one of the best stories to come out of the post-soft retcon stuff reboot. And honestly, I don't think I'm alone in it, and I don't think Josh is alone in it. Because I'm sure anybody listening to this right now would totally agree on that. But what do you all think, though? What did you think of Spark of Life? Did you feel it was one of the better stories, if not probably one of the best, if not the best story arc, to come out of the, Panic in the Sky, Sonic Unleashed, Brave New World, post-soft retcon reboot, Archie Sonic, if you will, story, if you will? Do you think it was one of the best that they did, if not the best, or one of the better ones out there? Do you think the reason was because it had that nostalgic feeling of, of the pre-soft reboot, soft retcon version of Archie Sonic, as well as a little bit of the nostalgic Sonic SatAM storytelling to it? What are your thoughts? Comment down below, live chat during the premiere, like the video. Check me out at my Teespring store, especially with Christmas time around it. Also check me out at BW Russ's Discussion, all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Very close to 300 episodes, guys, so get ready for that. Also, you could support me on Anchor.fm, with my podcast by going to listener support if you choose to. Also, check me out at BW Russ's on VENMO for content you can't get anywhere else. As well as check me out at BW Russ's on Patreon for the $1, $3 tier. As well as check me out on Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are. Comment below, and I'm out. I think my bus is about to arrive in just a little bit, because I am doing this outside, but let me know what your thoughts are. And I'm out.